Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beer Ladies podcast. My name is Thandi, and I am playing host today. And I'm joined by my great friend Christina. But we have two very special guests with us on this episode. We are talking to Emma and Jono from Crew Brew Company down in Limerick, which we had the pleasure of visiting sometime. We'll get to that, and have tasted their most magnificent beers. But we are here to talk about Crew Brew, how everything started, and it was a pandemic baby, this one, guys, so, be prepared, trigger warning, paninis, but we're going to get into the history of Emma and Jono, and we're going to drink some beers together and just act like friends, because that's what we are. So, just a very quick reminder to everybody listening or watching out there, we are on YouTube if you prefer to watch, and we are on all the podcatchers if you prefer to listen. We are at Beer Ladies Pod everywhere. That's what you need to know. And there are link trees in our Instagram and our Twitter accounts that will take you to our merch shop and to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can buy us a beer if you so choose. So that's it. Intro's done, guys. Let's go around and see what everybody is drinking. And I'm going to leave the crew folks to last. So, Christina, tell us what you're drinking first, friend.
I am drinking this beer from Lochgill. It's the Cutback New England Ipa. It says it's light in body and pale in color, brewed with Comet and Eldorado hops and lots of other things, tropical notes. Anyway, it's nice. It's really good. Today is my Friday. It's actually Wednesday, but I'm off for the next couple of days on a staycation. My family's coming to visit, so I'm really enjoying my first beer of the evening. This is lovely.
Happy weekend.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to just go in because we want to save the cruise for last. Failing not being able to get a crew beer, which we'll talk a little bit about. I've got Brewery, and this one I had to laugh at the name. It's called the Blurry Furry. I actually thought it was Fury, but it is furry. So I was like, ooh, I wonder what this can-not's going to be like. But anyway, it is safe for work. So it is a passion fruit, orange, and guava Berliner Weiss. And I chose this beer because we sat and had Berliner Weisses at Crew when we were in Limerick recently enough. And what was really cool was being able to pick your flavor. So because I couldn't get those, I got this one. And yeah, it's tasty. It's very low in alcohol, as Berliner Weisses are, and it's very punchy. So cheers to that. All right. Jono, do you want to tell us what you're drinking?
I am drinking Don't Tell Michael. Oh, I should do the can as well. I'm bad at this product placement stuff. Holding up my Kinniger glass instead of our can. Don't Tell Michael is a dry hopped German Weiss beer. Weiss beer yeast, traditional Weiss beer, and then dry hop with Mandarina Bavaria. So like that big banana-y clovey, but also like a lot of kind of orangey hop character. And it is pretty opaque looking.
That sounds really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of a dry hopped Weiss before.
Yeah, and it'll probably be gone by the time this is on the internet. That's the problem with all of our beers. But it is delicious, so you can just sort of know that through the internet.
Fine, we'll just take your word for it, Jono. Emma, what have you got?
So I'm on Free the Seagull, which is a hazy pale ale, which will definitely be gone by the time this is on the internet. Not that it's a race, but
is it called Free the Seagull?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a note on that. I'll hear about your beer first.
It's wonderful. It's super citrusy and tropical up front. A little bit of like kind of earthy bitterness at the end, but just very, very sessionable, very easy drinking. We named it Free the Seagull because we did a double batch of it, which is like 600 litres. And throughout the entire brew day, there was a little baby seagull that had fallen down in the alleyway between our building and the next building. And after, what is a double brew? Like 14 hours? After a 14-hour day, Joel, who works at Crew, had to take his jumper and rescue the baby seagull and bring it in front of the pub to save it. So I because of that story.
Dead.
It's really good.
The reason I said something is because I too had a seagull story. I had a seagull fly into my house.
No.
Oh wow.
My dog went outside and then the seagull snuck in behind, and I come inside my house and the dog and the seagull are sitting next to each other on the couch like, this is fine. This is normal. And I was like, okay, George, you cannot have a pet seagull. So then we had to like coax the seagull out of the house, but then he wanted to get back in. So he kept knocking on the window with his beak. Now he's flown away and he's doing his own thing. But I love that name. They're so cute. That's so great.
That's
I will send you
That is
Joel down
awesome.
next time anyway. Joel is seagull rescue extraordinaire. He got it. The pub was full and he got it out the brewery through the entire pub and released to the outside world without anyone noticing anything was even happening.
Yeah. One guy noticed and he opened, he's a fireman. The fireman noticed and he opened the door to let Joel out. He told me after.
Well,
That is
listen, we
so
now know
cute.
who to call.
Yeah.
It's just a short drive from
Joel from Crew to, you know. We love it. All right, guys, let's hear a little bit about Crew. Tell us how Crew started, who started it even, and you know, how did we end up with the awesomeness that's in the middle of Limerick?
because he did it before I was, I suppose.
I was there from the start. It started, I guess, just like a lot of things, drinking lots of beers too late at night and saying we'll do this one day and we'll do this one day and all that. So that was like 10 years of that or something. And in the meantime, our friend Gareth, he'd been working, he ran a restaurant in Toronto and he'd been working in hospitality here and there back home. And I was working at a few breweries and I was studying for the Master Brewer program as well. So kind of once we came out of that, and then Gareth lost his job and I had nothing to do and didn't want to move to London. And it was like, all right, let's see if we can write a business plan that would make sense. But we kind of thought I had no idea, like we had no chance rather, because we had no money really. But the kind of more we looked into it and the more grants there were and the more, like once you got a grant, the bank were a bit more convinced. And then once you had the bank, you could maybe convince some of your friends and all the rest of it. So it just kind of kept going round and round in circles. And then we moved to Limerick in January 2019. We signed the lease in June in the building, ordered the equipment in November, and then the world fell apart in December. And then the first we really heard about it was some of our equipment comes from China. The fermenters come from China. So we got an email saying the factory was closed down. And that was kind of the start of the kind of panic about it. But at the time we were like, oh no, the fermenters will be delayed for 2 weeks because there's a problem in China. But if we had like any intelligence whatsoever, we would have realized that this was going to be a problem everywhere very quickly. So yeah, just that it, like half of us are in hospitality really, and then half of us in beer, and we all love beer. So we kind of all wanted, including then when Emma came on and Joe came on and Annie as well, everybody wanted to do things a bit differently from how other people were doing them and how they'd worked in workplaces we'd worked before, prioritize some different things and look after people properly, like guests and ourselves and everybody else. So there was a lot of motivation. Like I had some really, really good employers who did things a lot of the right way, and basically everybody else only had bad employers. So they had the opposite motivation. So yeah, we just decided to see could we manage it.
That's amazing. And there is quite a lot to be said about the ethos at Crew. You know, it's quite visible from when you walk in. You know, no racism, no sexism, basically no dickheads allowed.
Yeah.
And it's just and I mean, I know that you sort of pride yourselves, it's even on your website, but it's, you know, you pride yourselves about being a living wage employer and you bring sustainability into the business wherever possible. So there's quite a lot going, you know, you're not just a brewery, you've got all these other kind of social goals, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of us, we would find the work a little too dull if it was just like if I was a one-man beer factory and Emma was pouring pints and that and like creating graphics, but not for anything that was achieving anything that meant anything to her. I think everybody would have been bored of it by now. So it's kind of those other bits that keep you motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that you do a lot of amazing work with charities. How do you choose the charities that you work with?
Yeah, that one depends. A lot of the time it's like if we're running specific events, like we did drag bingo recently, and the host we got in, we allowed them to choose the charity, and like whenever it was our birthday, we all sat down and talked about what was important to us and what was like local, and we would get to like really contribute to. We did like a staff series as well, where like each member of the team was going to get to brew their own beer, essentially, with Jono shouting at us if we're putting the letting us know if it's not feasible whatsoever, which I was quite close to. But So we would get to choose our own charities for that kind of purpose, you know, just something that like represents something you really are proud of and want to contribute to, you know.
Yeah, I'd say there's not much of like a real process. It's just like Emma says, whatever the event is, you try to make it relevant to that or whatever's going on, and then you just try to find something that people are excited about, because you're going to put more work into promoting and more work into everything else if you're genuinely excited about it, rather than just being told by someone we're doing this or we're doing that. So kind of almost for every decision we make, we're trying to have as like little of a hierarchy as possible with everything we do. Now that needs to be balanced with the fact that some people are part-time and obviously can't have the burden of all the work that comes with the whole place, especially if like they're not being paid for that. So it's kind of like balancing that, but while also saying, look, whatever it is you're into, you can run with that project. Like if you're excited about this charity or this kind of beer or this type of event or whatever, like that's your responsibility now. Go with it, and we'll see afterwards how we got on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing, firstly, that you guys actually managed to sort of open, close, sort of do crowlers. You know, there was a whole lot of sort of pandemic activities going on, and there was almost hopeful spurts where we thought, okay, it's going to be over, you guys can officially open. But that was quite a rough journey, if I remember it.
We were open 11 days the first time, and then closed again and then it was crowlers a lot of months later, and then closed for another 5 months. But I think the biggest takeaway from that is that if you ask for help, people will help you out. Like people were buying merch from us who had never been in the building, who just thought it was a good idea for Limerick. And then like some friends of ours, actually the crowler machine, we were renting it, but a friend of mine messaged me saying, look, if a load of my old friends get together and put some money together, would that help us out instead of having to pay the rental fee and all the rest of it? So our crowler machine was funded by just like my old drinking friends from the last 10 years. And people buying crowlers when there's plenty of beers available and off license that is closer and more convenient and doesn't have a 3-day shelf life and all the rest of it. But people were willing to go out of their way to get, obviously to get the fresh beer, but also because they knew if they wanted to be drinking pints in there whenever it was allowed again, they needed to come up because we were in trouble.
I love it. It's so community funded and community based and community driven. You know, it's a really wonderful way to have a brewery. And I think it's quite reminiscent of the way that breweries and taverns and businesses used to operate almost in the old days, you know, where it really was about small, local, just serving those around you, and that's it. But here's 100%. The question, you know, what if any are your plans to become more national? Do you have plans, or are you firmly trying to stay exactly where you are?
I think everyone wants to get bigger. It would allow everyone, you know, we're talking about doing the work you're passionate about, and the reality is that like that's not always the day-to-day work you're doing because there's lots of other bits involved. But I think everybody wants to get bigger because it's an opportunity to provide more employment, to get more people involved, more heads, more viewpoints for everything. The problem is like, well, money really is the problem. So if anybody listening has millions of euro to give us, no, it's also like the stress of it all, right? Like we already went through this once, now we're kind of on top of payments and all the rest of it. And it's, do you want to go and borrow another load of money from the bank? And could you even convince them? But yeah, I think like, I don't know. I think brewers listening will think I'm mad, but I miss operating a canning line and all that. Those are the bits I really enjoyed fixing, more things to fix. And everybody would like to be doing just more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something to said for now, just to enjoy the fact that it's completely exclusive to one room, essentially. Like you can only get this beer in one room in the entire world, kind of thing. So that's kind of a beautiful thing for now. Like I'm partly thinking of expansion, and I'm partly thinking of let's just enjoy this moment while we have it.
Yeah.
Every single person who's drinking one of the Crew beers has been in this room and has chatted to us and has had the full experience. Like instead of just buying it off a shelf and thinking it's a nice beer, they sat down and chatted to us and realized like, oh yeah, these people are actually really crazy about this thing. You know, it's kind of nice you get to inflict that on people.
I think that's probably our most exciting challenge, like particularly for Emma, because like communications and graphics are always going to be so much our responsibility. Is that how do you give someone the same experience they got when they came and they ordered a beer and I was finished work exhausted next to them when Emma was buying the bar, telling them all about it and getting them excited about Limerick and beer and everything else. Like how do you get that across on a shelf when you're not talking to someone and you only have a 440ml can worth of space to convey your values and the excitement and everything else? So
that's why I'm enjoying it so much now. Just
to tell people.
Put a wee voice note on every can.
That's actually not bad, is it?
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
There we go. Solving the world's problems on the Beer Ladies podcast.
Yeah.
So Emma, you
You could put a QR code to a video, actually. That'd be
Yes.
cool.
You can.
But I did want to touch on you talked about having like this sense of community, and I was just wondering how you sort of continue that through the brewery from the process of selling the beer and being the consumer. And I know like Thandi touched on this when we walked in, when we were visiting. I really liked that you had, the no racist, no sexist, no fascist, those kind of signs. And also that you had like free sanitary products in the bathrooms. Like these kind of things are really important as a consumer, which makes you feel like you really are, stepping into somewhere that's a safe place to be. And I was just wondering, like, what else do you do to kind of make sure that you're a part of your community and creating that sort of safe space?
Yeah, I think like providing a safe space was kind of top of our priority list, I would say. Like myself and Jono have talked about this quite a few times. It's probably maybe not the only place in Ireland, but it definitely is top of the list for me for women who have come in and sat and had a pint by themselves. I think that's like a really rare thing. Like I would see that every now and then in Canada, and I love doing that. I love going for a solo pint, but so often it turns out to be more of a nightmare than an enjoyable, relaxing experience or whatever. But like we would get like maybe just one or two women a night just coming in and sitting and having a pint and reading their book and then heading on or something. And I think that's been the biggest reflection for me anyway, of how we've just actually made a place where people aren't worried. They know we have their back. Like anytime there's been anything that's made anyone uncomfortable, we've sorted it out quietly, and those people have come back and known it's not going to be a problem again because we handle the problems, and then there's space for everyone.
I think with all the inclusivity stuff, you think about like a hierarchy essentially, where you start with who are the people in Limerick or who might visit Limerick or whatever, who might be around the space, who are going to be the least traditionally comfortable in pubs. And if you can do everything you can to make it as clear as possible that they're welcome and make them feel as comfortable as possible, automatically everyone else as you go up the thing is, right? So like I'm an example of someone who's very much at the top. I like this Irish pubs. Very rarely would I feel not able to walk in or not comfortable or not welcomed or whatever. So you can't go out and aim the space at me because you'd be doing nothing. You'd just be opening the doors going, well, I don't see the problem. That's fine. Like I'm totally fine drinking in places like this. So it's about being in constant communication with everyone, and then also listening to as many people as you can, but trying to think of specifically who are people we need to be as included as possible, who have traditionally been left out of both the pub experience and of the craft beer experience. And if you start from there, you don't need to think about everyone else because you're like, no one's being left out by your work doing that. Now, you do sometimes get some angry, insecure people who feel like they're being left out by that. But like my favorite example is the sign you mentioned there. We have the no sexist, no racist, no fascist sign. And very occasionally someone will complain to me about it. And I always ask them which part of it upset them. And they never have an answer.
We want to know why you're not alive.
Yeah. Oh, just the whole thing. I'm like, no, tell me which of the words upset you. But yeah, it's like, that's it. If you can make people, like I say, who have been historically left out of the scene as welcome as possible, you've already included everyone else. And if they don't want to be a part of it, that's a choice they're making rather than being actively excluded, which is a completely different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh. And does it ever reflect in your creative choices in either beers or beer names, the kinds of projects that you embark on and your values?
Well, a lot of the beer names are named after kind of either stories or often people, regulars, and like it's partly because we love them all, and it's partly because we're not very good at thinking of names. So there is a dual benefit there. But yeah, no, a lot, like I guess the whole thing, you try to be as coherent as possible, right? Like the ingredient suppliers we deal with, we try to find ingredient suppliers who share our values and everything else. And you don't always know people so well, and you do hear bits here and there that sort of take you back, but as best you can, you try to think whatever way we're thinking of creating the space, that also needs to be the same way you create the beers. And a lot of that comes as well with the beers being sessionable and all the rest of it. So we're not trying to make any beers that someone has one of and tells their friend it was crazy and then that's the end of it, right? Like we want people to sit and drink and enjoy their friends' company and elongate the day, or the good parts of the day at least, as long as they can. So yeah, like it's hard to think of specifically, but it is just like overall you try to think of everything. What are we trying to achieve with the whole thing? And if the beers you're brewing aren't contributing to that, then that's a huge missed opportunity, because it can't just be staff and space and whatever else. It has to be everything pushing in one direction.
Yeah, and even for names, it's never anything that would be pretentious or, you know, intense or anything. It's usually just a really, really stupid story that and then someone at the bar is like, why is it called Free the Seagull? And then you have to spend 5 minutes talking about a baby seagull that got stuck. Like they're almost like named for icebreakers rather than anything else. Like
Oh, that's another huge point.
A sound strategy.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great thing as well, because it can be an intimidating environment for people who haven't either been in with us before or haven't been into a craft beer bar or whatever before. So to like be able to say some silly name and then have Emma or whoever laugh and then tell you the story and whatever else, you're kind of already in, and then you've eased people into going, and what did you like about that and what didn't you like about that, and try a bit of this and whatever else, you know, rather than having someone stand there staring at it all and they don't know what any of the styles mean and they don't know how to pronounce half the words, and like they're just like hop names or whatever that have no relevance to them, so they're just kind of panicking, you know. That's no good for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so you make it an in joke and then they get in on the joke and then they're part of the group and not an I love that. I love that you're creating like in group, come in with us instead of because even as a, you know, Thandi and I beer judges, like sometimes beer names are really daunting with lots of different hops names, and if you don't know what all that is, and even if you do, it's sometimes okay, but what does that translate to here? And what does that mean? And sometimes a silly name, I like the ideas of silly names and stories. I think that just, you know, brings people into the community, like we were saying. How many times
it's also a big part of like taking the beer and people's safety and people's enjoyment as seriously as we possibly can. Our entire lives are around creating high quality beer and achieving that in the space, and then taking absolutely nothing else seriously at all ever. That's kind of that was the whole business plan. I can't believe the bank gave us money after we just wrote that, but
that's great.
I think you actually do get the feeling though, because everybody who hasn't been to Crew, you will definitely want to go and see Crew out in Limerick, but you get the feeling that it's just really fun to work there. I mean, it's fun to drink there, it's fun to just be there, but it just looks so fun to work there. It's so cool.
Although I wouldn't to anyone who might get hired. But no, I would recommend. I think it's good.
I also really liked when we were there that you could be part of the creative process of what you were drinking as well, because we were drinking the Berliner Weiss and there were so many different fruit additions that you could put in, which was kind of fun. Then you could customize it yourself. And then my everlasting dismay, I didn't realize you could combine more than one flavor.
To be fair, you weren't meant to. That was I just was chatting and then I was like, strawberry kiwi though.
But I loved that you could, you know, oh, I like this and I like this, and I just thought that was really, really cool and a lot of fun, and that's why I drank all the Berliner Weiss that night.
All of it.
That was a particularly fun thing to do as well, because it's kind of like it is the traditional way of serving it, right? So like it will be served with syrups, I mean, as far as I know. So it was exciting to do something that was completely new to most people who came to drink it, but also had a kind of anchor in history.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the sort of choose your own adventure vibes.
Yes. Every night out there is a choose your own adventure night.
It's very fun. Now tell us about the setup, because I know that basically you've got a model that I would love to emulate if I was ever smart / stupid enough to open up a brewery. But it's kind of like, the latter one, right? Yeah. It's kind of like brew all the fun things and change it up all the time, except for a few regulars that you'll keep on tap. So tell us more about your model and how you've chosen this brew sort of system. What is it, 300 liters?
300 single batches, and then we have 4 300-liter serving tanks essentially. So we're serving on keg and direct from serving tank, and we basically chose whatever would fit. That was the whole selection process. Well, we're happy with it. Like, we have a Brewix kit from Get a Brewed Cell there in the north, where they come in from Slovenia, and then we have two double batch fermenters and 2 single batch fermenters, kegs and serving tank only, plus the crowlers. And I think it must be the smallest brewery in Ireland. It must be.
It's the smallest room I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's 6 meters by 2 meters, the whole brewery. So I would be very surprised if anybody is making, and if they have a smaller brewery, that they certainly make as much beer as we are in there. Like, our brew house is, like, the electric box is pressed up against one of the fermenters, and then the other side there's like this much gap to get through to the cold room, and then 2 more. Like, it's pretty intense there. It's very warm in the summer.
Yeah, it's impossible not to walk into about 12 things.
Yeah, carb stones and sample valves and everything. You end up covered in bruises if you work there. It's not all positive working there.
Oh, I love that. And how did you choose then to decide, okay, we're just going to brew almost whatever's on tap today is on tap, and you'll probably never see it again, or maybe you will, but sometime in the far future.
It's been interesting. Like, Emma would know much better than me about people's reaction to it, but I know when we first opened, people were a bit more put off by that, and now they're kind of getting into it. But people would have found something they liked, come back 2 weeks later, and it wasn't there.
Yeah, the phrase that fills my entire being with dread is, last time I was here, I had.
Yeah.
You definitely won't have it again, but I've got you. Like, I think our whole thing, like, maybe the reason, or not the reason, our beers change all the time, but one of them perhaps is that there are just so many unbelievable possible beers, so many possible styles and so many possible flavor combinations within the styles. And we can only have 4 brewing at once, if you know what I mean. So, and we all have very short attention spans, I'd say. So we just want all these different beers all of the time.
Yeah.
So it works because when people come in and they say what they had and what they liked, the people behind the bar know enough, like we did our beer server exam. We've studied beer styles, and we've tried every single beer Crew's ever made. So anytime anyone says they like this thing, we'll be like, oh, okay, I've got 3 things for you to try, and then I'll be able to pick out what parts of that you liked, and then we'll go on a little beer journey here, and I'll bring you through all these different styles, Like, it's quite nice. You can take someone who comes in and they ask for a Heineken, and you give them a Pilsner, and then they come in again, and you're like, oh, do you want to try this one again? They're drinking bourbon barrel-aged stout from Rascal, So you can just keep building it up and keep getting people to try things and finding out what their style is and stuff. I think it's quite nice.
Yeah, 100%. If anybody, including yourself, was considering doing it this way, you need really switched on and really engaged bar staff, because it's an isolating experience to come back after the 3 weeks and not find the thing you liked. But it's not an isolating experience at all if you have people who are engaged and are happy to get you excited and find something else. But if you're just looking up and going, oh no, now I have to guess again, and am I going to like the next one I guess? It's a terrible experience for people. So yeah, it only works in that way. I was just looking there on Untitled Chapter. We're at 46 beers now.
Wow.
I know 47 or 48 are in fermenter at the moment, and I know 52 is going to be a B52's reference. That's my only plan for that.
That's so fun.
But yeah, that like I say, like Emma says, we just want to get through as many things as possible, and we have 4 fermenters. Like, the idea of locking 3 of the fermenters up into a flagship and kind of every 2 weeks getting to try something new is a nightmare. And like, we're still developing process. Like, every good brewery should always be developing process, but we're only 48 beers, whatever it is, a year, and nearly coming up on 2 years, but half the time we were closed. So like, we're very, very much still at a stage where we're still trialing loads and loads of new process steps and new ingredients and new everything. So that's the other great thing about the pub, is that we get instant feedback, like both positive and negative, but people will tell you when you release something new. So and it's like incredibly rewarding, obviously, for me to finish work and have people say, can you brew this again, or I missed the milk stout, whatever, can you bring that back? It's like, all right, this is nice. I could go for this.
That is nice. I like it because on the one hand, you're right in that you want to learn all the different techniques and ingredients, and you want to figure out your processes and figure out what works well in your system and what doesn't. But it's just so nice to have novelty as a brewer as well.
Yeah.
I always I admire the macro breweries and the guys who do all of these very consistent same styles over and over again, because there is a certain art in that. A whole lot of it. Yeah. Oh, it's mad. But it would drain my soul, I think, to go through that sort of repetition. For me, anyway, it would have to be kind of a lot of variation and then maybe one or two flagships, because otherwise
Yeah.
my attention wouldn't be there.
Like I would love to have the second brewery and be producing, like, say, some of the flagships over and over again, because you do get the joy of going, okay, we're brewing it on Monday and Tuesday. So Tuesday we'll change this slight process step, and we'll actually be able to do triangle tests, preference triangle tests, whatever, side by sides. We'll be able to get really, really good information on one specific brand. But at the same time, we wouldn't want to be doing only that. So, like, really, it would be amazing if we do manage to expand and we can kind of do both sides. So the brew team would get to have a load of fun down on Thomas Street there. And then in the meantime, you're able to really, really dial in the flagships too.
Yeah, and even like from a consumer perspective, it's lovely to be able to go to the same place and have all these different wonderful experiences every time, you know.
Yeah.
You're not, oh, we're going to Crew again and we're going to have beer A again and we're going to have the same evening we had last week and we're going to do all this, you know. Like there's still a bit of variety even in the same place, you know, which is quite nice.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like very rarely do I drink the same beer like over and over and over again. Like I have a couple go-tos, but typically when I go to the shop or if I'm in a pub, it's, oh, what's new? So that appeals to me. But equally, I know that there are consumers on the other side that like, you know, the consistent thing. But for me personally, I like the variety.
I think it's been a bit of a journey for the people that come to us as well, because I think Irish people are extremely brand loyal. Like Irish people tend to be, I'm a Guinness drinker, I'm a Beamish drinker, or that's it. So when they kind of got to like the space and like the vibe and all the rest of it, and they found something they liked, they kind of felt comfortable again. Okay, I could be a poly drinker in here or whatever it might be. And then they quickly discover they can't be. But everyone's like was a bit perturbed, I think, and now everyone's excited to come back in and say, like sometimes people give me grief if there's no new beers for a whole week. Like there's no new beer this week. That's like, all right, you wait till next week. There'll be something.
That's when you know that someone's a regular.
Yeah,
It's always good.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Jono, how did you get into brewing? What is your history in this?
Drinking. That's what I always said. Started drinking and then started drinking more and more craft, and I was living in Toronto and I got a job at Steam Whistle Brewery there in the packaging line. So I worked in packaging, then I did some lab work, and then I did some brewing, and then I went and studied in Munich for the Master Brewer program. And then once I graduated that, all the jobs basically were in London, or all the jobs that would pay not well, but by brewer standards well. So instead, I took a terrible paying job doing our own thing, which seemed more fun than moving to London. Like I was away for so long, and I wanted to come back, and I wanted to be in Ireland to be close to my family and all the rest of it. So, yeah, kind of done everything pretty much. Like I say, from tour guides to packaging to just about everything you can do in a brewery. Squeegeed a lot of floors. That's really the main task in every brewery.
The world's best.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm very good. I was supposed to get a squeegee tattoo last week, but it fell through. But we wouldn't later date.
That's amazing. And Emma, tell us about your history. How did you get into the beer scene, so to speak?
I wasn't hugely beery. I started in cocktails, to be honest. And then I was living in Belfast at the time, and then I went on holiday to Toronto. I got like a little 2-week holiday, half-price flights, and then I skipped my flight home and stayed for like 2.5 years, like almost 3 years. Visa switched over and got a job in a restaurant, and you know, it was wonderful. One of my managers in the first restaurant I worked in had his Brewdome course, and he was certified to teach as well. So he was kind of teaching me while I was working in this first restaurant. And then that same restaurant group opened a craft beer bar, and I was bar managing that. And then I worked at another cocktail bar, and then I worked at another bigger craft beer bar, and everywhere I went, I was drinking craft beer. I was doing little brewery crawls all around Toronto. I was trying to do everything. I was living with Jono at the time, so all we talked about was beer.
It's impossible to overstate like how much that period radicalized us into believing in beer as a like delicious drink and as a force for good and as a force for crack and all the rest of it, visiting all these places, and you just got a sense that that's an environment you wanted to be in all the time. Yeah,
just all the greatest, kindest people, most passionate about what they were doing. Everybody, like if you came in and you said you're interested in working in beer, they would just pour themselves a pint and sit down with you and chat to you for a couple of hours. Like they were just Everybody was so wonderful.
Which is why Ireland needs more tap rooms.
Exactly.
People need more onboarding and more access to see what the industry is like.
Yes.
Yeah, it's infectious. Like it's a beautiful place to work. Like lovely people doing lovely things. I couldn't recommend it more.
We really do need more tap rooms, and we don't have a lot of them. We also don't have a lot of crowler machines. So I mean, you guys are pioneering in a lot of ways, which is.
I can see why we don't have many, because the process is a complete nightmare. The licensing process is such a disaster. So that's what needs to change, really. But I think they're supposed to be doing a review of that, but I think it'll be a struggle because pub owners have a lot of sway and a lot of money. So I think we're going to struggle to end the kind of current pay for a license system. And without that ending, people who don't either come from money or whatever else are going to struggle. Like, we were able to secure loans for the pub license, but only because we were a brewery. So like the craft beer bar side wouldn't have done it itself. It's only because we were doing manufacturing as well. But like, yeah, it's just such an enormous cost and such an enormous barrier. So when you go to other parts of the world and it's just like some furniture they built out of pallets and like some brewing equipment, and as they grow with it and all the rest of it, it's like a lot easier to do than it is here. There's a lot more barriers to entry. So, but it will be amazing because it allows people to look at the process, like from ingredients down to process to people. The people's the main thing, right? You get to see people who are really excited, because it's tough for craft brewers in this country to really excite the bar staff in places where they're being served, because they just don't really have the resources. But when you have it in-house, like if the person's not excited about it in your own brewery, you have a serious problem. So like when people come to your brewery, they can kind of pick up on all of that. And like every time someone comes into us, it's not just our stuff we're talking about, we're talking about our favorite Irish breweries, and we have cans and guest lines every now and then and all that. So we're kind of introducing people to a lot of new stuff. And without that, like customer facing tap room, it's just never going to happen.
I noticed that as well, that you do have guest taps every now and then, or I don't know how regularly, but I think that's very inclusive of you as well, because it's one thing to want to introduce people to your own beer, but it's I feel like it's a nice thing to do, to introduce people to your neighbor's beer and some I don't know, friend in beer's friends. And
I think we're just like, for me and Emma at least, and probably for everyone else, like we are also just fans of like a lot of Irish craft beer and craft beer. We're fans of a ton of Toronto breweries, but like I have my Rascals hat on and I'm drinking from my Kinniga glass, and like I just like I like nice. I like a lot of the people involved, and I like a lot of the beers. So like if you hear the stories there about me and Emma going around Toronto getting excited about all these different breweries, like we want people to find that joy that we did, and that doesn't just come from one place or from one producer. Like people I know I can think of specifically some people who they do drink our beers. They came in, they were unsure, they got onto them, they started to love our beers, and now they mostly drink like Lambics and Deck from Otterbanks, his beers and all that. And it's kind of like, it's nice to see people found the joy of it, so that they're not hoofing pints of our hazies anymore, but they kind of came in without an interest and they left now passionate about a ton of different areas of the industry.
Yeah. It's nice, like we know we make very nice beer, but we also know a lot of other people make very nice beer, and it's nice to be able to support them as well. Like that's another thing that just fascinated me about this industry, is just how supportive it was, instead of like making everything a direct competition. Like if there's another brewery in your city, it's not, doesn't mean you're going to go head to head. It means more people in the city are going to get into craft beer. Like it's a supportive community network instead of just scrapping each other. Like, so it's quite
and there's so many people came before us, right? Like we haven't been open that long, and we know specifically in Limerick, Treaty City's production and their presence in the city and pubs has really helped us, because they introduced a lot of people to craft beer who never would have had it before. But also just like even just around the country, right? Like people will have had some Kinniga cans, or they will have had this and that. So when we opened, you weren't starting from a brand new concept. Like it wasn't a whole new world to them, these beers. So for all that they benefit from us, and Ireland's a particularly hard place, as you know, to get taps and to get into pubs and all the rest of it. So we have nobody telling us what to put on and what to do. So and like some of it comes about naturally. Like you just talk to someone. I'll be talking to a brewer and they'll tell me about a new beer that they've got coming out. They're really excited about it, and as soon as I hear that, like Joel does the orders, I text him and say, yeah, your man from Rascals is really excited about this release coming out. We should try and get some of that. And
that's marvelous, and it does go along with the sort of rising tides floats all boats, kind of mentality, I guess, which is
all
such
the
a
nice
wonderful way
ones.
to live.
Yes. Again, we try to find breweries to share our values and sell as much of their beer as possible, right? Like I do love the beer industry, and Emma's absolutely right in everything she says, but there are problems also in the beer industry. So like you need to be careful sometimes, because it can be easy to say everyone's really nice and everyone's really great, and we're selling all these beers from all these other people, and then you find out a little while later that they're not quite who you hope they might be, and it can be a little disappointing. But people we sell, the people we work closely with, they're all friends of ours now since we opened. So it's really exciting to be able to sell their beer.
Yeah, just like every industry, there are dickheads, and the awesome humans that make up the rest of the population. But that's the way it is. Okay, so Emma, didn't you brew a beer recently for Crew? Was it your design, your recipe?
I did brew a beer. I think Jono quickly regretted the whole staff can choose a beer concept. But anyway, I brewed a beer. I think we were sitting together, weren't we? I think me and Jono were sitting on the sofa, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna start a staff series, so everyone's gonna get to put their own thing in." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Put that in the group WhatsApp." No, you're like, let's make this. Let's start this. Let's get this ball rolling. And he put it in the group WhatsApp, and I would say less than a second later, I had replied in the WhatsApp saying jalapeno lime Goza. So I called dibs right away. I wanted a beer that tasted like a spicy margarita.
I love that.
This is amazing.
Why am I not closer to Limerick? Because I love spicy beer. It's like my favorite thing.
I love Gozas, so I'm just there for this. I'm here for it.
It was fascinating. It was an experience. I've never seen someone so quickly regret.
Oh, it was a nightmare. I thought people were going to be like, "We'll do a Dunkelweiss," and I'm like, "That's grand. Yeah, we could do that." But I didn't expect anyone to say jalapeno at any stage in the process.
Yeah, it turns out it's a little bit of a nightmare.
It sounds glorious.
I mean, it was, but
it was delicious. It was a very elaborate process that I wouldn't be eager to go through too many times in the week, but it was quite special in the end.
It turns
what made it so challenging?
Jalapenos don't taste like jalapenos was the first problem, right? Like fresh jalapenos is not what people associate with that taste. It's like jalapenos in brine, essentially. What you associate with jalapeno, but obviously the acidity of that is a nightmare.
Yeah, Emma wanted as well, like that kind of like the fresh pepper character from it. So it was all about how do you get as much of that into the beer as possible without extracting all the things you don't want in vegetables, which is like the majority of the vegetable. So we actually at Street Food Done Good, who are a food truck up the road from us, we kind of enlisted their help. He had a sauce for they were delicious, really high quality jalapenos, and I can't even remember really what it all was, but I know there was sous videing, I know there was freezing, I know there was roasting, there was
So, like the original brine is too acidic because it's vinegar based or whatever, but he made like a pink peppercorn jackfruit brine.
Oh yeah, I remember all this. I had locked those out of my mind.
Day process from I have some jalapenos for you to these are now able to go in your beer after a fierce amount of effort. Like there was flash freezing and sous vide, and then there were an obscene number of processes. And really, like people keep saying it's my beer. I said the words jalapeno lime and helped carry things, but Alex from Street Food Done Good, a visionary. Jono made it actually happen. Like it was very, very, very much a team effort, and it was beautiful.
It was really fun though, because you're talking to like Alex is an amazing chef, and you're talking to him about flavors, and you're kind of learning a lot about all sorts. Because I was trying to explain to him that fermentations, it's quite an aggressive process, so you're going to strip out a lot of whatever character, because we were wanting to whirlpool it rather than having anything go into the fermenter. So he was like, okay, he's like, this is how you make the most intense jalapeno you've ever eaten in your life. Like, this is how you prepare it. So it's like, okay, let's aim for that. And then whatever we get going into fermenter is going to be insanely intense. And then as it's stripped and as it's conditioned away, it will hopefully, like, it's all just a guess, even in quantities and process at that stage. So it's like, hopefully we'll leave it at an acceptable level where it's like present and delicious, but not overpowering. But yeah, it was fascinating talking to him about, you know, because if it was up to me, like I'm not in any way capable of making food, so I would have thrown some jalapenos into a bag and into the whirlpool and hope for the best. But he was like, no, you need to do this and you need to do this. So yeah, we're currently going through that now. Actually, we're doing a saison for one of our other staff, which is ginger, coriander, elderflower, rhubarb saison. So he's gone through a similar process. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have to plan your next
Goodness.
visit.
Well, I think, Thandi, we're going to have to go on another road trip.
Yep, another road trip down to Limerick.
Yep. I
Yeah,
think it's
we
going
gotta
to happen.
This is definitely going to happen. So, Emma, was that your favorite beer in the whole world since it went through so much effort?
It holds a place in my heart that I don't think any beer will ever take. My favorite beer tends to be the one that I'm currently drinking.
Fair.
You know,
I like that. Yeah.
mindfulness and beer. But I would say that's always going to have like it's a permanent place in my heart. Like that beer that was even like on the day it was released, I was so excited. And then as soon as I poured the first one, I was like, oh, everybody's going to hit this. that like massive fear because my name was associated to it and all, you know. And then I realized that must be how you feel every time we release a beer, Jono. So then I was like, oh, it's probably fine. These have all gone well so far.
People drank so much of it. We thought it'd be like a novelty for people, but people would sit there just drinking them all night. Like people were really, it was great to see.
You would have one and then move on to your IPAs. But
it disappeared.
Like, there was a group of
guys,
people and they drank 54 of them or something across 2 days.
Yeah.
Like
they were in Limerick for the weekend and that's where they spent their time.
I mean, spicy beer is the best beer. I love a nice spicy beer and will drink and buy the hell out of a spicy beer. So I am totally with the group that drank 54 because, well,
Alex is going to be terrified when we expand and I tell him we're doing a 20 hectoliter batch of it. He's there in his food truck trying to prepare 100 kilos of jalapenos.
Yeah, I think it's going to be my style now, though. Every time I get the chance to make a beer, I'm just going to choose a different spicy thing. It's going to be
definitely do spicy ones. One of the best beers I've ever had was a Habanero pumpkin beer, which was out of this world. I don't remember who made it. It was years ago. But
I'd say Gozas as well in general kind of lend themselves to a lot of different things.
Like, a little bit of salt.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you think through the food world and you go, what goes well with salt? It's like, well, everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that jalapeno lime Goza. I had one with so many different types of food to try them all. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend Boujin.
Boujin was very good with it.
Divine and a spicy chip. They're my two food pairings for it.
Well, there it is.
This world. Yeah.
And see, now I'm thinking, do the spicy or do the Goza and then add the fruit things that you did with the Berliner Weiss. So then you get your strawberry margaritas, you get your raspberry margaritas, you get your whatever. Oh,
that would be unbelievable.
We need to come visit, Thandi.
Yes, we do. So, Jono, what has your favorite beer been so far that you've brewed for Crew?
I think the Verbena Goza. We're just going to do all the Gozas. So I think Emma's drinking it. Yeah, there it is.
Nice.
It's lemon Verbena Goza. It's like it's a fairly straightforward, like citrusy Goza, but it's whirlpooled with coriander and quite a bit of lemon Verbena, which I don't like. I wasn't familiar with it before we made a beer with it at my old work, so I don't know if that's like a known thing or if I was just ignorant before. But it's basically just a herb that's more lemony than lemons. It's quite incredible. So yeah, that I think that's my favorite beer. We also have like the vanilla milk stout would be another one I like. It kind of depends. Like I don't know, I drink everything. It depends on the mood as well. I guess we're predominantly producing sours and hazies, and then those are beers I love to drink, which is why we're making so many of them. But it's also why, as you say before, like it's exciting to do these other bits. Like when we do things that are a little bit further away from that because I don't get the chance to do them too often. We're going to do a West Coast IPA there in 2 weeks again. Bits like that like kind of we don't get to do so often. When we did the Rauch beer, I really loved that. That was another one that we thought would be a novelty, and it just disappeared as well. So I think that would be another one for October. We'll do that again, and yeah, basically everything. I've never met a beer I don't like.
It also just sounds like everybody else just likes whatever you produce as well. But I mean, could you give us a sense of what are the trends? You know, what do people really like in terms of styles or flavors, or what are people not liking at the moment?
So I think it was surprising to me that I know it shouldn't be because the haze stuff's everywhere, but I think because so many of our drinkers, they're not keeping up with the trends of craft beer. They're not following a million breweries on Instagram and all the rest of it. Largely it's like people who like our place and who like some of the treat you say beers and are willing to try bits, but they're not like hardcore craft beer fans. Like they're not on Untapped, put it that way. So I was surprised to see how much like reflection there was in the kind of the trends in our place as there was kind of in the rest of the world. But I think just like the hazes, they're just so easy to drink and they're so easy to drink multiple of, and they're like challenging enough that they're very far away from Heineken, but they're not so challenging that like it's a struggle to finish one and you don't want any more, right? So we're seeing a lot of that. I'd say like, I don't know, again, I think Emma would probably know better than me. Like I take cues from them. We do it like an end of night email every night. And it's like, are people asking for this or are people asking for that? But Emma would have a lot more contact with the drinkers than me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is funny. As you said, it's almost hard to narrow it down because every time we release a beer, it just seems to go unbelievably well.
It's gone.
Yeah.
There are a lot of times when like everyone who comes in is like, oh, but you remember that vanilla milk stout? And you're like, oh yeah, like we're gonna get that brewing again now. And then somebody will go, that brown ale was unbelievable. And oh yeah, what about that IPA? And, like, and then you're just, oh no, I actually have a list of 20 beers.
But we need to rebrew. We only have 4 fermenters, so no, but I think it's a hugely privileged position as well that people like. We can now, when we produce the route beer, even then, but if we didn't now, like people trust us, right? So they don't need to have heard of the style before, or even to think it sounds very nice to be like, okay, but I always like the beers in there. I'll give it a try. Right. Which is like we always talk about. Our cousin's a music promoter, and he's at that stage. We're putting gigs on that because he's putting the gig on. People will go to it because they trust his taste and they trust that he's bringing over really high quality acts. So they don't necessarily need to know the band to rush out and buy a ticket. Which is like just an extraordinary privilege when you're excited about these things, because you can brew a beer that if it was sat on a shelf at Tesco, nobody would ever touch because they don't have that contact with you or whatever. But when they see that we're excited about it and they've had our beers and liked our beers before, they're willing to give everything a try. So yeah, we can kind of take it in a lot of different directions. Like I know a lot of breweries are always complaining they can't produce. They'd love to produce a rag beer, they'd love to produce a brown ale, or they'd love to produce these things, but the market isn't there for it. But for us, it's like whatever we put on goes. So as long as we can keep it up, we can brew whatever we want.
We would never serve a beer that we wouldn't happily drink by ourselves, right? Which I think is a pretty important part.
Yeah, that's like we have dumped batches, and I don't think everyone has done that or is willing to. And but it's all about protecting that that kind of trust with people. You know, you can lose that very, very quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a great privilege, but it's also a huge responsibility.
Yeah,
you have a massive, you know, position where you have to make sure that you maintain that level of trust. It's a level of trust.
100%, yeah, and you can't miss the mark on anything. So it is very stressful, but you do have to be willing. Like say, like where. I don't know how many batches we've done, probably 3 or something. Like it's not something that's happening all the time, but there have been. I know for at least one of those beers, there was a long discussion where we were kind of like, look, this isn't bad, and we could sell it, and that's this much in revenue, and the ingredients are gone, and whatever else, and we just reached the conclusion that for exactly those reasons, if we want to keep the trust, and also for when someone comes the first time and that's the first beer they ever try, you haven't built up that trust with them, so you may be more willing to be forgiven by other people who have enjoyed a lot of your beers. So yeah, it's kind of a painful thing to do, but yeah, you just have to dial in processes and make sure it's not happening too often, and then when it does, be willing to act upon it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a good point actually. Like every day is going to be someone's first day coming in, you know.
Yeah.
So you can't just be like, no, we've been open for 2 years, it's grand, like we're here.
Yeah.
Every time someone comes in for a pint, it could be the first time they're in, and
and for us, like we say, it's the first time they're having any craft beer a lot of the time as well. So you're kind of responsible for the entire market at that stage. So if you push something out that you think's just okay, and then they don't like it, like, they don't come back to you, but they certainly don't buy Lockgill cans in the shop next time they're in there. You know, the reality is that the beer that us and everyone else is selling is more expensive than the beer often that people have already been drinking. So you're not going to convince them to come over with something you didn't even like. Never mind them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You really have to go sort of above and beyond to get that trust, and especially if it's someone's first time into or trying craft beer in the first place, you know, what is all the fuss about? And if the fuss is well, why did I spend this much more for
Yeah, and like so many things we talked about as well, it's about having a consistent chain there where you're building trust with people within the space. You build trust where people could be themselves and ask silly questions that risk looking stupid because they didn't know what this meant or that meant. And then you're building trust with the liquid itself because, as we say, they're going to come back or they're going to go and find some other stuff the next place to go, and they're going to go on and carry on their journey to something that can really, at least for all of us here and for a lot of people we know, really, really contribute a lot to the enjoyment of our lives, just trying different beers and discovering different breweries. So yeah, the idea that you blew that within 10 seconds just because you wanted to generate however much in sales from a beer you didn't like, it's easy to make the decision once you put it like that. It's just tough at the time when you sat there going, I don't know.
I think if you've gone in with that mentality, you've already kind of covered.
Yeah.
There's a lot of breweries who will send out some kind of subpar beer, and it's not to say it's completely infected. It's just not right, you know.
Yeah.
And it is, as you say, you know, that could be someone's first experience of the whole industry. And often people will taste one bad beer or one beer that they don't like, which is not always the same thing. And then they'll say, oh, I don't like craft beer. You know, that's it. So, I mean, Emma, you just sound as if you're the master of getting people excited and curious about trying all the new beers. And so what are your tactics? You know, what are your tricks?
Yeah, I've often been compared to a golden retriever, so it kind of fits into the industry. But I don't know. I would even hesitate tricks. Like it's literally just like, what do you like? Like it doesn't even have to be in beer. What do you enjoy? Do you like? Sweet things or savory things, and like, do you like sitting and sipping away on a very, very tasty kind of strong beverage, or do you like even a load of easy drinking hazy beers? You know, like it's it goes so far beyond what people think their style is, you know, because a lot of the time when people are coming in for the first time, their style is Heineken.
Yep.
The other big thing I think
do you also like
one of the things that I would observe is the samples, right? Like someone comes in and they look for Heineken and they'll get a pint of we have the Larkins Pilsner. So they get the Pilsner, no problem. Everyone's always very happy with that. But at the same time, it's like, look, you've come up here and you bought a beer and nobody ever says no to some free beer. So it's like, while you're up here, try a bit of this. And like more often than not, you'll find when they come back, they have more questions or they want, what was that thing you gave me? I'll have one of those this time and all the rest of it. So
yeah.
Sure.
A lot of the time, if I'm doing samples, I don't tell them the style or the name or anything that will just kind of flood with information, and then people be like, oh no, I don't think I like IPAs, and kind of sway it more. I just like hand them little tiny glasses and say like mango. And like just push them really slowly towards them and be like, pineapples, try this little tiny beer. And they'll taste it and be like, why would I not drink pints of this? Like, and then they just like, once they're on that, then they're going to come in next time and be like, last time I was here I got some samples. And then they're going to get new samples because it was, you know, all new batches and all. And then they're going to try out different things. You get to really work out people's kind of tasting profiles and what they like, what they go for. And then even then, like, if they come in and say, oh, you gave me this one that tasted like pineapples and da-da-da-da, but we don't have any of those on draft. Like, as Jono said earlier, we have so many unbelievable cans in the fridge. So we can be like, oh, Whiplash made this beer, and then it's lovely, and it has a similar profile, and I think it's a good next step for you, and all this stuff, you know. So people just love because it feels like a personal experience as well, you know.
Yeah, it's just like a friend telling them something they're excited about, which whether you are initially or not, you're going to hear them out because, you know, whenever anyone's passionate about anything. But like with all these things, it's just access as well. People haven't had access to trying these beers. They certainly haven't had access to trying them really, really fresh. So you're giving people those opportunities, and like we all know, it's not going to be for everyone, but the beer is nice. Like, beer is delicious. So if you give people enough access to it, they're going to discover that they like it.
Well, and I think that's an important point. It's the access, because it can be a little gatekeepy. Like sometimes, like definitely know when we've had ladies craft beer side of Ireland events and people come and say, hey, I have never drank craft beer, but it looks, interesting, what should I drink?
Yeah.
But they've experienced possibly places or times where it's quite intimidating, or people have been rude to them.
Yeah.
There's the whole hops arms race with the IPAs, which can kind of, Emma, you kind of touched on that. People can get a little, because, for a while there, at least it was how many hops can you shove into this beer without kind of thinking about, you actually have to drink the beer.
Yeah.
And, and enjoy it. So I definitely, from my perspective, completely agree with what you're like. Absolutely. It can be really intimidating. And I know even when I was getting into beer, I was really intimidated by people who knew way more than I know. And then of course, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
There is a whole world of information out there that I can't even touch on. But yeah, it's just, it's really cool that you guys focus on that and are cognizant of that when you interact with people and yeah.
Like a big thing we would have been aware of when we opened was that a lot of craft beer bars have that gatekeeper thing where they're kind of laughing at people that drink Guinness or they're laughing at people that drink Heineken or whatever. And it's like, this is not a way to engage anybody with anything in any industry. Like that, you're not like making people feel like they're wrong for a thing they enjoy is not going to help your cause at all. Like you're trying to show people that there are alternatives and that these alternatives often have some commonalities with these things they already like. So they might like this or they might like that, or they might not. And that's fine too. Like, but you're not saying you're wrong because you came here and you told us you normally drink Guinness, or you're wrong because you came here and you told us you normally drink Heineken, it's like, oh, okay, that's grand. Those are perfectly good options. Sitting in a pub drinking those beers, something you enjoy. We're not going to tell anybody they're wrong for doing that, but they're also available in every pub in Limerick. So like, let's try and add some variety and some excitement and to bring you along with us on it instead of saying this is only for people who already know. So the other thing is that not only is that like the morally upright and exciting and enjoyable thing to do, it's also the only option you have as a business in Limerick, because Limerick doesn't have 10,000 craft beer fanatics waiting for you to open.
Right.
Like you need to create a scene yourself, and you have an opportunity therefore to shape that scene in whatever way you want. And we would like it to be as enjoyable for everybody as possible. So we're the kind of first opportunity for a lot of people to see that.
What I really liked is what you said there, Emma, about not giving people too much information up front. That is genius, firstly. But it is so common when people don't always understand the difference between, it could be an IPA and a stout, or a pale ale and a sour. It doesn't matter. But telling them what hops they're using or what yeast was used does not help that understanding. What helps is flavor. So it's like, okay, this one is going to taste maybe a bit like coffee. That one's going to taste a little bit like, I don't know, citrus fruit. And just give maybe nothing at all. Let them decide. Let them, let those flavors or those descriptors emerge from them. It's a really interesting way of doing it.
Yeah. Sometimes I go even cheesier and I just say, like, it's very sunny today or something. I would just be like, oh, would you like a pint of sunshine? And then I just like push like our juiciest, haziest, sunshiniest beer that we have on at the moment. Like if it's a big heat wave, people come in and they're like, I don't know, a beer please, like a lager or whatever you have. I'll be like, do you want to try sunshine? Just like give them that sample and they'd be like, oh my god, that tastes like sunshine. Like that is exactly what's happening right now. So sometimes it's almost like like people just have like an emotional connection to it instead of just thinking like, yes, it is citrus fruits, like it doesn't, it's not necessarily, if you're not used to judging or critiquing flavors, then it's just, oh yeah, this just makes me feel like it's a sunshiny, summery drink I get on holidays or something,
So I think that's pretty consistent. Like I know I'm definitely a weather-based beer drinker.
Oh, me
myself. Too. Yeah. Like when it's rainy, I will definitely reach for something darker and a little bit heavier. And when you're talking about when it's sunny and hot, I'm definitely reaching for those sunshine beers, as you say. So I think that's, and like also, sometimes you don't want to know all the ins and outs of beer. You just want to know, well, I like it. Does it taste good? You don't have to know why. It's just fine to be like, oh, I like this. And I shouldn't even say it's just fine. No one needs that permission. But like, when I was getting into beer, it would have been so nice to have people be like, oh, it's okay for you to just like it. Like we don't need to know all the ins and outs. So that overload of information, as you're saying, is really important.
I think brewers really underestimate people's capacity to like and not like things as well. Like all the time, brewers will say, "Well, they don't know. They just like the public don't know what they're talking about. They didn't like this beer, but they don't know what they're talking about." Go, well, they may not be able to pick out a specific element they didn't like about it or explain to you what they didn't like, but people know what they like and what they don't like. Same with food and with drink. And if people are mostly not liking your beers, it's probably that they're not that nice and not that people just aren't getting whatever genius thing you did that you think everybody else should better pick up on.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, I think the main thing is just allowing access for people to ask questions if they want to, and if they don't, if they just want to be like, give me a pint and I'll probably enjoy it, then grand. Like, it doesn't need to be a thing that they go home and all read about, and they don't need to get into beer as we are. If they just want to. There's
an element of education by stealth there as well, right? Where like there's little bits and they're learning. Like there's people coming in who aren't asking millions of questions, but they are coming in. They go, "Oh, there's a new pale ale. I like those. I like the pale ales." Or there's a new hazy. I like the hazies, whatever. And they've never sat down and had a conversation with you about what that means or what the parameters of that are. They're just kind of getting tricked into getting excited and learning about it via pints.
And like, even if you know a lot about it, you might not want to know all about what you're specifically drinking. Like 9 times out of 10, when I go into a bar to have a beer, I don't need all that info. I just want to know, okay, what style is it? And then we're off. Yeah. And that's it. And then other times I want to know all the ins and outs. So, there's that too. It's,
It's lovely that you cater for everybody and bring everybody along, along the journey with you. I think that's absolutely amazing. So guys, we're going to start wrapping up, but tell us now where everybody can find you. So I can tell everybody listening at home that you've got to find Crew at definitely Instagram. So that's at Crew Brew Co on Instagram. And your website is crewbrewing.ie. Where else can people find you? How should they get in contact? Where should they visit you?
35 Thomas Street.
Yeah, by far the best way to experience any of it is to come to Limerick, which is a great beer city in general as well for anyone who's considering a trip. It's not just us, there's a lot of really cool places to go. But yeah, Twitter as well, Crew Brew Co at Twitter. But the Twitter is really just sort of my Twitter account where when I'm working on my own all day, I just tweet odd things. So yeah, if you want actual information, I'd say the website or Instagram might be smarter.
That's good.
If it helps, I laugh at your tweets whenever they come out. They really do make me laugh. They're super random. I do love it. Okay, so everybody
come drink pints anyway.
Yeah, oh yes,
that's the main thing.
Go drink pints. Go drink pints down in Limerick. You guys need to meet the crew at Crew Brew. It's an absolutely phenomenal place and well and truly a gem. Like a real gem. And Christina, you and I need to go back. So
yeah, that's happening.
That's just it. Yeah, that is definitely happening.
Instagram takeover when the beerladies come down.
Oh, nice.
Ooh. Oh, okay. Planning trips as we speak. All right. Everybody listening at home, thank you so much for joining us. And Emma and Jono, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto our wee podcast and chatting to us about your wonderful, wonderful brewery and tap room. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Christina, friend. Everybody at home, check us out on the socials. We're at Beer Ladies Pod everywhere, and all of the links to buying us a beer or buying some merch are all there on our socials in our bios. So with that, we'll see you all next week, same time, same place, potentially new guests. Bye.
Bye.